The Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, one of the most famous positions throughout history. Loved by many, hated by others. Sometimes these popes would go around to different places. How would they get there, you might ask? Actually, probably didn't. But they got there using Popemobiles. Yes, there is such a thing, and there has been a lot of them. Supposedly 32, but I could only find information on
17.
different Popemobiles. But first, let's start with what the Popemobile actually is. The Popemobile is basically just a modified car that the Pope rides in. Generally, their back seats are modified to have one throne-like seat for the Pope to see people. They also may include some symbolism such as doves woven into fabrics in the back seat of the cars. However, the most important feature of these vehicles is visibility. The public would be able to see the Pope through the windows, bubbles, or pieces of glass in the vehicle. Now that we understand what a Popemobile is, we will start with the first one, or in this case, it's just a horse. Popes would use horses to transport themselves from wherever they are to Rome, where they would reside. Once the popes got there, he pretty much never left. Now we move on to the next mode of transportation for the pope, this being a carriage. It took until the year 1800 for the pope to be transported to Rome by carriage. This was done by Pope Pius VII. One of the first popes to actually leave Rome for parades was Pope Leo XII. He used the next mode of pope transportation, this being a carriage called Grand Gala Berlin. Made for Pope Leo XII in 1826. Made from wood and some gold, it also had the scale of justice and the patriarchal cross. The interior was red velvet with a dove to symbolize this Holy Spirit. By far the flashiest of all the papal movers, Pope Gregory XVI would remove the seat that the coachman would sit on, meaning that he would have to ride a horse instead. The Grand Gala Berlin was retired in 1870 by Pope Pius IX. The first real car to be given to the Pope was in 1909, but the Pope declined, being unsure about the technology. This leads us now onto the first real Popemobile that was actually used by the Pope, this being a Grand Page 837, used by Pope Pius XI and Pope Pius XII. This vehicle was donated by the brothers who founded the Detroit Automobile Company. This car would first be used to celebrate the agreement between the Vatican and Italy. The next Popemobile was how do you say this?
Citroën Lictoria C6.
Citroën
Lictoria C6.
Citroën Victoria C6, which was presented to Pope Pius XI and saw some use with him as well. It had a fancy interior that was made to resemble a Venetian-style drawing room, and the canopy had embroidered a dove on it. This was also the first Popemobile to have mentioned a throne for the Pope to sit on. These features have become standard throughout the rest of the Popemobiles. The next Popemobile was a Mercedes-Benz Nürburgring 460 that Pope Pius XI used. Depending on who you ask, it was considered to be the first official Popemobile. Pope Pius XI called it a wonder of modern technology during a test drive. Some of the features of the car were that the Pope could direct the driver with a push of a button. The Mercedes-Benz Nürburgring 460 had a top speed of about 62 miles per hour. This car would eventually be retired after 25,000 miles. The next Popemobile was the Mercedes-Benz 300D used by Pope John XXIII. This was the first Popemobile that had a convertible top. Now we move into the Pope John Paul II era of Popemobiles. Pope John Paul II was given roughly 11 vehicles for him to use over his time as Pope. And this list might not be in chronological order, so just be aware of that. First one that John Paul II was given was a Mercedes-Benz 300 SEL, which had a convertible top. The next car was a Fiat Campagnola, presented to the Pope in 1980. It was used for about a year until the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II. This would bring the era of the Pope box or Pope bubble to help protect the Pope from threats. This design feature would be a staple of the next 4 vehicles that the Pope had. Given that I wasn't able to find much information on these beyond them being used by the Pope, I'll just go over them very quickly. These cars were the 1979 Ford Deer Series, the 1980 Mercedes-Benz 230G, the 1985 Mercedes-Benz 500 SEL, the 1987 Mercedes-Benz 608, the 1997 Mercedes-Benz S-Class convertible, which is weird that they made a convertible for him, and a 2002 Mercedes-Benz ML340. The Pope would be gifted a Cadillac D Villa Parade Phantom for his visit to Mexico, but he never used it due to security concerns. Another car that John Paul II used was a Ford Transit that he used during his visit to Ireland. Fun fact about this car, you could actually rent it for about $385. Apparently some people used it for celebrations. Anyways, Now that the John Paul era of Popemobiles has ended, the next Popemobile is a Lincoln Continental Lemon Peterson. It was a heavily modified vehicle that was outfitted with safety features such as metal armor. Now we get to the current Pope at the time of recording this being Pope Francis. He was first given a Renault 4L in 2014. He would later use a heavily modified Jeep Wrangler as his main vehicle. One of the main features of Pope Francis's Jeep Wrangler was that it was open air on 3 sides. This is obviously a safety concern, and Pope Francis knew it by saying, "It is true that anything could happen, but let's face it, at my age, I don't have much to lose." Old man Francis. That was
17.
Popemobiles and one carriage over 16 different popes, spanning over 100 years of automotive development. The concept remains the same. Move the Pope around and show him off to the masses.